Hi, this is Corey Reddekopp. I'm the CEO of the Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce, and want to give you a little bit of an update on our tariff toolkit, and I'll walk through what you'll find at langleychamber.com/tariffs, and give you a little bit of the lay of the land on what the tariff situation is right now. Obviously, this is changing all the time, but as of 10 o'clock on March 19th, this is where we stand. So let's dive in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the current state of U.S. tariffs and the retaliatory measures that Canada's put in place, some exemptions and mitigation strategies you should be thinking of, and what other tools, funding, resources you'll find at langleychamber.com/tariffs, which is our tariff toolkit. So this is the state of play right now. We've got kind of six on between Canada and the States, six issues that are in some varying states of activity. So let's dive into what each of these means. So the first one is what started all of this is the 25% broad-based tariffs on Canadian goods and 10% on energy and potash. These are the ones that were talked about before the inauguration, then were going to be brought in February, and then ended up being imposed on March 4th. Came into effect for 2.5, 3 days there, and then were paused on March 7th until April 2nd. So they're paused right now, but they were in effect for 3 days. These are broad-based on tariffs on Canadian exported goods. Services are not mentioned explicitly in the executive order, but pretty much any good that you might sell into the States or export there are going to be impacted if this were to come into pass. There's a list on, there's no list online for this one because it's just everything. But in the pausing that happened until April 2nd, the Americans said it was going to be for duty-free items, things that were eligible for duty-free, no tariffs under CUSMA, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, the new NAFTA. They use the term CUSMA compliant. So trying to find a definition for that, the finance department here in Canada says they're seeing CUSMA compliant as meaning that goods that used CUSMA in their trade documents. So applying for preferential treatment on tariffs using CUSMA. Lots of businesses didn't bother doing this because they didn't need to. The most favored nation tariff rate was already pretty low. It wasn't worth doing the paperwork. So that's something that you might want to be looking at now is that the Americans are using this as the frame. CUSMA compliant is what we want to see. And their numbers, they were quoted as saying only 68% of trade is CUSMA compliant. We don't know where they got that information from. It should be much, much higher than that number. So if you're not using CUSMA, if you're not getting CUSMA certificates of origin and using that trade agreement in your exports, you might want to talk to your customs broker about can we get that up to snuff and use that because if this is the frame they're using, I can imagine a situation or a scenario where maybe the tariffs are paused again or indefinitely paused, but only for items that are in using that trade agreement. So you want to make sure that you're taking this time to not get caught off guard there. I know these tariffs were in effect for a couple of days. I know a couple of businesses actually got tariff goods moving during that time. There's been no mention of any refunds or rebates for anything paid or owed during that time they were on. So that's what started this whole thing off. They're not active now, but coming up on April 2nd, they will be. We then responded with our own batch of 25% tariffs on American goods coming into Canada. Those are obviously in this tranche, it was mainly focused on kind of end consumer goods, the orange juices, peanut butters, you can see here, wine and cosmetics and some pulp and paper products. These are valued about $30 billion. These are active. They were active when they came into effect with the Americans, and we didn't take these off in Canada. So these are still active on American inputs coming in. The CBSA, the Canada Border Services Agency, is collecting these tariffs as a surtax on goods that originate in the U.S., even if they're imported from a third country. So if you have a bunch of U.S. goods coming from somewhere else into Canada, they should still be tariffed. And we've heard that it's now being applied not just on commercial goods, but we've had reports of consumers driving across the border for cross-border shopping being hit by this as well. So it's in effect. These ones are active. There is a duty drawback program in Canada, and it will be applying to this. So if you're not familiar with that, again, maybe talk to your customs broker or whoever you work with to advise you on tariffs and exports and duties. But a duty drawback is generally where if you're an exporter, but you bring products in to the country and then you export them out, or you bring products in and then you use them in your manufacturing process. There's a way of getting some of those duties that you may have paid. So look into that. And there's also a remission program or an exemption. So the Canadian government wants to hear if your inputs you're bringing in from the States simply cannot be sourced from anywhere else, or by doing so would cause undue harm to the Canadian economy. So if it's just going to be, if we're going to have too much of a supply chain challenge, or we're not going to have a supply of critical products, they want to know about that. So you could possibly look at an exemption there. Obviously, the big mitigation on this would be resourcing, finding your supply chains from other areas, and lots of businesses are now obviously looking at buying Canadian or looking abroad to other countries that are a more reliable trading partner to find their inputs coming in from the States. But just know this one is active. This is all retaliatory measures on the States. Um, that was our first tranche of tariffs. The big one is this $125 billion worth of goods, which is going to be applied on April 2nd if the Americans go ahead with their tariff. So this isn't active now, but it will be. This list is way bigger. It has lots more food products, equipment, machinery, tools, and bits and pieces, and all sorts of things are on this list. This list and the $30 billion one that I just talked about are public. You can go online and search for either the item description, so carrots, or you can search for the HS tariff code. If you don't know what your code is for your products, I'll tell you how to find that in a second. But this big list, which isn't active right now, is up for public consultation. So again, find if your products are going to be impacted, the things that you're bringing into the States, your inputs, if they're going to be impacted, you have a couple of weeks now to be figuring that out. What's that mean for my margins? Can I withstand this? Can I find other options? You've got until April 2nd to be doing some of that pre-work. But you also can let the government know and also let the chamber know if there's any items, specific items that you know what, this is just going to be too much of a hardship. There isn't any other options. I don't support this being tariff. That's the government's doing consultation right now. So this list of goods that they have out there is more than 125 billion, they've said, and they expect them to be taking some things off the list. So you could use this as another mitigation option, is to say whether there's items that you can get removed. So this one's coming on April 2nd. This is us, our big retaliation, 125 billion import tariffs on American goods coming in. The one the Americans have gone ahead with and didn't pause and is active right now is their 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. This went into effect on March 12th. This list of items is also public. I've only seen them as PDFs with a bunch of HS tariff codes. So you want to use that tariff finder tool, which I will show you in a second, to figure out what those codes mean. We already went through this show once in 2018 when we had steel and aluminum tariffs. This is a much larger list. The scope is much bigger, and many more downstream products will be impacted. So you want to be looking at this list because these are active. You want to be knowing if your products going into the States. I'm sure you're finding that out now, but you want to know if your products are on that list to be tariffed, and vice versa, what's on the retaliation list, because we've retaliated on this as well. So we had the initial list, we had the big $125 billion list, and now we have another list of $30 billion worth of steel, aluminum, and other goods, which are active now. These tariffs are in place. This covers tools, computers and screens, sports equipment, a whole bunch of metal and products. These are active. Again, they're listed online, so you can go and take a look and see whether your products are included on these tariffs. So we've got three from the Americans, one and three from us, and they're in varying states of active or pause. But if you're active, it's time to start figuring out, can you withstand these tariffs? And what are your other options for resourcing your supply chain? And if they're paused, you've got some time here to be doing those same calculations and maybe seeing if there's any of those mitigation measures that I mentioned that you can take advantage of. What's coming up? Well, April 2nd obviously is the date for all these tariffs that have been paused, but there's more coming down the pike. So automobiles have been mentioned. They're supposed to be coming in at some point in April as well. We'll see whether that comes to pass. In April is going to be also these reciprocal global tariffs. So the Americans will apparently be issuing letters to every trading partner they have saying, here's what your tariff rate is going to be if you want to export into the States. And they're basing that on reciprocal tariffs. So they're looking and seeing, well, what do you tariff America? And we're going to be putting the same level of tariff on your country. Now, the vast majority of products in Canada are tariff-free, duty-free going into the States before this whole mess. So you might say, well, that doesn't really impact us. It shouldn't. We have a trade agreement with them. That shouldn't. They've, however, picked on our GST, the digital services tax, and supply management in our dairy and other sectors as non-tariff barriers. And so they're starting to lay the groundwork on that. They're going to put a dollar amount or a percentage amount on those things and say that's in effect a tariff. So we'll have to see how this comes out on April 2nd as well. What the action is in this space. And then someone's tweeted or mused or said on a hot mic, all these things on the bottom: copper, lumber, ag products, semiconductors, all sorts of things have been threatened or announced or are being studied. So I think tariffs is a long road to go. But obviously the big 25% blanket ones are the ones that we're concerned about, you're concerned about, and I know we're fighting to convince the Americans that would be a very counterproductive measure to take. So all that's kind of the state of play. We have an online toolkit with all that information's on there, plus a whole bunch of other resources and things I wanted to walk you through really quick. The Canada-US Trade Tracker. This is a shot of kind of some of the data you can get from that. It's the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. I find it really useful. You can pick on a province and find out kind of their key imports and exports, where those products are going to, and you can also find a state, look at Washington or Georgia or Illinois, and find out where their most dependent trade is. And that's the argument you make with them: is if you have a supplier in Washington State, you would tell them, hey, you're the most trade exposed state in the nation, and a whole bunch of your trade comes from Canada. You need to be fighting on your end to be pushing back on these tariffs. So the Canada US Trade Tracker, very useful information. You can find the link to it on our website. The tariff finder. This is the tool I mentioned. If you don't know what the HS code or the tariff code is for your product, or you have that code and you want to know whether it's on the list, or vice versa, this is a tool that you can use to figure that out. So here's how it works. I think I've got a little video here. So you just click into here and you're going to go and say, hey, maybe I'm importing products, and I'm going to put from the States and say I'm bringing bolts in. So that's my input. I use bolts. Then it's going to ask you some questions about, well, what kind of bolts are you using? What are they used for? It's going to ask you what they're made out of. And then, so in this case, it's copper bolts. And then there's your code there. So then that was what you would use to be looking on all those lists I'm talking about to see whether that code is mentioned. So that's where, if you don't know your HS code, this will give you a chance to find that out. Um, the toolkit also has a whole bunch of webinars and events and readings. We partner with some strategic partners to bring their events and make them available to you. So you can find other resources and events and programs that you can go to. There's readings and guides and all sorts of things to be thinking about, and informing and educating yourself on what you could be doing as a business in this turbulent time. Our Langley business directory is linked on there. If you're looking to reshore some of your supply chains and find, well, is there a local business that can do this? Do I need to bring it in from the States? Can someone else get me those copper bolts? The Langley business directory has over 1,150 businesses on it. They are all members of the chamber. They're local businesses. These are all, so you can search it by category, you can search it by keywords, and you can find your businesses. This is what it looks like if you go to our landing page here. And it's our directory gives you some information, and then we have them broken out either by a search all category, or you can look by sector, and it'll take you off to our directory where you can look and search and find local businesses that can help you in any of these areas. So if there's one thing we can be doing as individual people, whether you're impacted by this explicitly as an exporter or importer, or you're going to be impacted by the economic fallout of this, we all can be trying to find more ways to support local and support businesses here in Langley. And then lastly, funding and support. There's a bunch of information that we have available on there on funding programs. The government's announced a bunch of them recently. The federal government, they have four kind of key ones that have just kind of been gone live. The Trade Impact Program through Export Development Canada is going to help exporters reach new markets and also help them with economic challenges from the tariffs, for lack of cash flow barriers to expansion, those types of things. BDC got $500 million in funding for very competitive loans to help cover operational expenses, to offset costs, to help revise your supply chain model. That's through BDC's Pivot to Grow program. Farm Credit Canada has a new trade disruption customer support program. There's $1 billion to support the agriculture and the food industry to address cash flow problems, help businesses adjust to operating in this new environment. So those are three funding programs. And also the CAN export grant just opened. So this is designed to encourage small, medium businesses to export their goods to other markets. So we're trying to really encourage people to look outside of the US and to diversify our trade. This will help businesses with up to $50,000, 50, in funding to travel to foreign markets, to go to trade missions or trade shows, to get market intelligence on which market would work for your business, to translate, adapt, or create new marketing material tailored to that market. There's a whole raft of things that you can get funding for. It's a cost share model, so they'll put in half and you put in half, and it helps maybe make some of those decisions to, well, I wanted to export, but I'm not quite sure. I haven't been able to make that decision or make that investment. Maybe this grant can help you do that. So the applications are open right now on that part. So visit the Tariff Toolkit. It's langleychamber.com/tariffs. It has all this information. It's updated daily as new things are coming in. So thanks for watching this, and we'll see you on the next update as we navigate this challenging time on tariffs and trade.